Welcome to the SDR DiscoCall podcast, a podcast designed for brand new sales development reps in the world of software as a service. Every Tuesday, we're going to be bringing you a new guest who's still in the role to share how or why they've gone into sales development. What have they learned in their SDR career and journey to date? And what 3 pieces of information would they like to share back to new and existing reps to help them become happy sellers? Every show is transcribed, recorded with links from the guests, which are available at happyselling.io/podcast. I'm going to be your host, Neil Buyan, and I look forward to taking you into the world of sales development through the SDR DiscoCall podcast. Hello, all you happy podders. So in today's show, we're going to be taking a little bit of a twist off the beaten track where our guest is no longer an SDR. However, they had a very successful SDR career and then transitioned into the role that most of us want to get into, which is an account executive. So I thought this would be very valuable for our listeners. And our guest is going to share on how to effectively ramp up as an SDR, how to give feedback whilst working in a new scale-up or startup, how this person dealt with the frustrations and feelings of being held back in their career when they really wanted to get into the AE role, but also a really cool story of how I played a very small part in this person's sales career and in essence it helped them get promoted, and how to progress into that team lead role and how to find a mentor to level up when you're taking that account exec position. So with that in mind, let's begin. Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the SDR DiscoCall podcast. Today we have a special guest. This person I consider a really good friend. I really respect them as a sales professional and somebody I had the privilege of working with a few years ago at a company called Showpad. Today we have Rhys Mason on the show. Rhys, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Neil. I'm really good. How are you doing?
Not doing too bad, and all the better for speaking to you, sir. And thanks again for giving us your time today, dude. So, guys, for Rhys, for the people that can hear you but they can't see you, please could you introduce yourself? Like, who are you currently? Where are you based in the world? Where are you working? And kind of what do you do?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm Rhys Mason. Previously worked in recruitment for 5 years as a junior recruitment person and then moving into running my own recruitment agency. I now work for a company called Showpad. So we're an enterprise sales enablement vendor. I've been here for 3 years, started as a BDR, moved into the team lead role, and now I manage our enterprise customers. So I'm all about retention and expansion, and I'm currently based in London.
Thank you very much, Rhys. And I do hold some fond memories of working with you. I think it was back in, 2017. I think I was an account exec at Showpad. And I remember we was in WeWork Moorgate. And I remember one day this bright young lad, super brimming with positivity, walks through the door, smiling and everything. And I was just like, who the hell is this guy? And then you kind of sat down in the room, you introduced yourself. And I just thought, you've just got so much positivity about you. I've got time for you. And obviously I've seen you grow and I've followed you very closely on LinkedIn. But as you mentioned, we're obviously going to go into our stories and rekindling our memories together in terms of sales enablement, Rhys. But as you said, you were somebody that previously worked in recruitment, and checking out your LinkedIn profile, I can see the stint that you did within recruitment. And then obviously being a client executive at Magentis and then coming into Showpad in 2017. And as you said, you're kind of managing clients today. I would love to know, and for the listeners out there, like, walk us through your story of how did Rhys Mason get into sales and how did you get to where you are today, dude?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I first left college after studying fitness instructing, personal training, anatomy and physiology. And at the time, I was just about to leave college, and I was actually personal training a recruitment manager who liked the way that I was, coaching him. And he suggested, hey, why didn't you come into recruitment? How would you like to earn £100,000 in your first year? And as a 17-year-old boy, I thought, wow, that sounds incredible. And then fast forward a year later, I did not earn 100 grand a year. I was still a junior recruiter and realized that I had a long way to go. But I was fascinated by the idea of sales and helping people find jobs, helping companies solve challenges. So I worked my way up through recruitment. I moved around to different companies, getting promoted to heading up local divisions. And then I started to create my own recruitment company called Tactics, which was a spin-off from Magentis, and they work on a lot of consultancy projects. During my time there, I started to also do some work for Magentis as well and start to work with their clients, discovering projects, building out projects, these types of things. And I started to realize that Magentis themselves do test automation and software consultancy. So I started to get more exposure to the software side of things rather than resourcing. And I really found it fascinating. I really wanted to work for an organization that sold a SaaS solution. So I wanted to try and get into the SaaS sales world. I knew some people that were working in there already, and they said that, they really enjoyed it. And the more research I did into it, I realized that you can genuinely solve business challenges and you get to meet some great people along the way. So I guess in a nutshell, that's why I ended up working for Showpad. It's one of the best moves that I personally feel like I've made in my career. I've met some incredible people along the way, including yourself. And Showpad's been incredibly good to me, and I've been able to help a lot of our customers along the way. So that's basically, I wanted to help people. That's a common theme from fitness instructing, then into recruitment, then into solving business challenges through sales enablement. So I guess that's the passion that drives me underneath everything.
I love it, dude. And as you mentioned, so that's quite interesting. Like, I didn't know about the PT side of it, like with personal coaching and training. And then somebody like recognizing your talent and saying, do you want to help kind of find talent for other companies? And as you mentioned, you launched your own business and also working with somebody that's in your industry, but you then got interested within SaaS and within sales. And then lo and behold, like you came into one of the number one places in terms of sales and sales enablement at Showpad. When you were that recruiter or that person going into that transition, what did SaaS mean to you? Because I know with a lot of SDRs that are recently coming into the field, SaaS is a completely new term. Understanding about startups is completely like an alien world for some people. What did it mean to you, and how did you come to understand what SaaS was and why it was something you wanted to get into?
It's a really good point. When I was recruiting in my early part of my career, I would hire a lot of people who were actually implementation consultants. So they would come on site and implement on-prem software. And that was, pioneering. That was breaking through technology. And then when I started to look into SaaS, I was like, actually everything is cloud-based. This makes much more sense. It's software as a service. It's on a licensing model. So I was always interested in the cloud, how quickly SaaS solutions can be scaled for companies and implemented into companies versus something that's on-prem. But if I'm honest, it took me a little while to get my head around it. I remember when I first joined Showpad, I loved the concept of having this digital briefcase for salespeople. But actually, once I started to drill down deeper, I realized that actually there's a lot that I've got to learn here. And what they were trying to achieve and actually what the product was really took me some time to wrap my head around, well, how does this actually work in practice, and how do other companies use this? And that took me a little bit of time to get my head around.
Okay. And I can remember like those early days at Showpad when we were still building out the London and EMEA team. There was a lot of things that weren't defined. We were a sales enablement solution, but we were still coming up with our own versions of what it was and how we pitch it. And obviously, like when you came on board, it was like a couple of iterations later down the line in 2017. And as you mentioned, it took you a little while to get your head around it. How did you get your head around it? How did you like learn and kind of perfect like what you were learning?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, first of all, I leveraged your expertise, so thank you very much as an AE. But also not just speaking with. I think first of all, if you're joining a new company, make yourself known, spend time with top performers across the business, understand how they sell, how they position, and really try and understand the value proposition from a sales perspective. If you can understand how somebody runs a sales cycle, you, in theory, should be able to understand how to open the door for that initial conversation. I then went one step further and spent time with customer success teams, so understanding how they manage customers, different use cases across different industries as well, and then also spending time with any kind of professional services team. And obviously this will vary from company to company, but I really wanted to get an end-to-end understanding of how do we position this to a customer? What are the pains? What are the different personas? How are we solving their challenges? How does that roll up to solving a business challenge? How do we implement this? What types of integrations, for example, can we offer and why? And then how do we ensure the continuous success of that customer? I think once you've got that kind of understanding, you can then scale that back to your role, but it also means that you come across as much more of a trusted advisor. You're much more consultative, and you're not just a person trying to book a meeting. You're somebody who has a good understanding of how your solution can help that company, and people will give you more time, and it will serve you a lot better in the latter stage of your career as well.
I love it. And it really reminds you of like the whole Showpad intro deck that we used to do, like where we used to have this element of 80% of people are product experts and 20% are consultative sellers, but it's the 20% of consultative sellers that close 80% of deals, because not only do they know the platform, but they know the industry, they know what's going on in the world and what people actually need and want. And that's what people buy into. And to be honest, like even myself, when I joined Showpad, it took me probably a good 3 to 5 months to really understand that well, because sales enablement, and I loved sales. And the reason I joined Showpad was like, if we're selling to salespeople or VPs of sales and VPs of marketing, it's their job to sell visions and products. So that's why I want to be learning from them, not only from the tool, but the customers that we work with. But like for you, how long did it take you to be ramped up to, be fully proficient, get that understanding, and be able to articulate that to a prospect on the phone or like kind of in a meeting?
Yeah, it's a really good point. My ramp up period was 6 months. And after 6 months, I started to get a lot more traction in booking meetings for my AEs and really understanding a lot more about the product. If I'm honest, that first year, actually that first 12, even up to 18 months, you're still learning. And what I would say to anybody who's just becoming into an SDR role is really use those first 6 months as much as you can. It is a ramp up period. You have more time, if I'm honest, than you usually would. So, once things get busy, they just get busier. So for me, I think those first 6 months was a great time for me to ask all the silly questions that aren't silly questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question, only if you ask it twice. So, ask the questions from everybody, really try and understand why, really just keep hammering on. But to be honest, it took me 6 months before I started to really get good traction. But even after my first year, still learning, still trying to shadow other BDRs across the business who were booking in meetings, listening to their calls or doing role plays with them to try and understand what does good look like, and how can I tweak this into my own meeting. So ramp up 6 months, but always learning, always trying to learn more.
I love that. Hashtag always be learning. I'm a firm believer in that. And even to this day, I'm still learning from people like yourself as well. And I think it's a really interesting point that you say there, like, you had those 6 months, you were able to learn, like not everything's going to like make sense straight away. And I do see a lot of SDRs that get frustrated because like they may be a month or two in, they haven't hit their target yet. They see their peers booking meetings and stuff like that. And sometimes they feel that they're not busy enough. And I always say to them, like, look, this is kind of like the quiet period for you. This is your learning, learning curve. And I said, dude, or to miss, like, trust me, when it gets busy, you're going to miss these days of not like having stuff to do, sort of stuff. And I've seen it like throughout. And I think equally what was interesting at Showpad was I joined when it was what we would call a startup. There weren't as many people. You joined in, and I think you came at the point when we were a scale up, and you're now in a company which is deemed as an enterprise vendor and leader. Like for you, going through those iterations of Showpad, you've seen different versions of the company. What has that journey been like? And are there any tips for people that are coming into maybe they're at the scale up stage and their company is now transforming and growing up? What advice and tips would you give?
I think the advice that I'd give to people that are a part of an organization that's rapidly growing is, yes, you're in a sales position. Yes, you're trying to book meetings, but fundamentally you're in competition with yourself. So going back to the point that you mentioned there around, during ramp up, people are booking meetings quicker than me or those types of things. When you're going through a fast growing business, it's always growth. And this is fantastic. There's going to be changes in the company. Processes might change. There might be a bit of a reorg. New people might join. Targets might change. I would just say, of course, always be aligned to the vision and understand where you're going as a company. But just, keep yourself grounded. Keep focusing on what you're doing. Don't get disheartened if, you might feel that there are certain changes that get implemented that don't benefit you. Don't get disheartened if there's a new sales methodology that's rolled out and all of a sudden a colleague next to you is booking 2 times, as many meetings as you are. You're only at competition at yourself. You have your target. Just stay focused on what am I doing? How am I helping me? How am I helping my AE? And how is this impacting the company? So definitely keep grounded. If there are any big changes that are coming up as you're growing, just make sure that you're aligned to the other departments as well. If, for instance, there's a big change in the way that they deliver professional services because you're pivoting towards a more complex customer or more mature customer, for instance, spend time with PS, really understand what do those changes look like. And as long as you're in the know, you'll feel much more confident about being able to ride the wave, ride those changes. If you become quite insular and you don't keep yourself up to date on what's going on in the business, or if you begin to shy away from reaching out to people in other divisions, then you'll become an island. And now that we're working remotely, that can have a bigger impact than I think it would have before. So my top tip is, if you're going through a company that's growing incredibly quickly, keep yourself in the know, keep your head down, keep doing what you're doing, and try and understand where the business is going and how your role can help the company achieve those goals quicker. And share ideas as well. Absolutely share ideas. There's a couple of processes that I've suggested to our leadership team at Showpad when we've been going through changes, where you think, actually, I've got this simple idea, and I think if we were to implement this, things will be a lot smoother. So just speak up. You have a voice. If you're part of a scale up, you're invested in their future. Everybody has a seat at the table, and everybody has a right to an opinion. So that would be my top tips.
I love that. Like, everybody does. You're right. Everybody does have a seat at the table, and that's something that I felt at Showpad as well, because you're not just being employed to be another number or to be another employee. This company is looking to scale and grow, and they need as many hands on deck to help out with it. So yeah, if you think there's a better way to do something, or perhaps there's an optimized way that you could help the company or the company could work together, you have to voice those opinions and don't be afraid to speak up. I think in the early days, I used to see a lot of stuff at Showpad and be like, I wouldn't do that. Or maybe there's another way that we could do that. But I felt too scared to say it. But like PJ and Louis and David Dupree at the time were always recommending us to say, like, look, if you've got this idea, we're open to listen. That's kind of why we've hired you, because we want great minds like collaborating with each other. So a big piece there. And obviously you were somebody who was very bright. You had a lot of cool ideas, and that obviously led you on to being nominated for something. And there was a little bit of a, what do you call it? I don't know, LinkedIn SDR celebrity life going on with yourself. Like, what was the story behind that, Rhys? Could you tell the listeners?
Yes. Well, first of all, you're a very good liar. No, I'm kidding. No, I got nominated. I think I just entered the team lead role at Showpad, so I would have been in there for probably about a year. I got an email, and I was a bit confused at the time, but I got an email through from, I think it was InsideSales.com, regarding the Sales Development Summit, and I'd been nominated for one of the top SDR awards, and it was a global competition for people who could either be nominated by people that they were working with, or by their customers, or by people who just know them and know the work that they do. It took me by surprise. I was really enjoying my role at the time, but I was surprised to see this nomination. But it was very humbling. And then after a busy period, I think I ended up number 1 in the UK. I was one of the top 10 globally. It was amazing. It was a really good experience. I got to contribute towards an ebook. for BDRs as well, in terms of, and SDRs, top tips, how to advice and just things like that. And it was a really great opportunity, because I think as an SDR, it can be quite tough. You really are, you're constantly working towards a target. Each month that resets. You're constantly looking to hit your target this month, build pipe for next. Sometimes you'll deal with prospects who are fantastic and they give you the time that you deserve. Others may not be as nice, and it can be a bit disheartening. Things get moved. So it was really nice to kind of recognize that actually all the hard work was paying off. And it's been, it was a huge part of my career, if I'm totally honest. And after about, I think, 6 months of trying to track down who it was that put me forward, it was in fact you. So I owe you a huge thank you, and I'm forever grateful, because it was a really big turning point in my career. And a lot of people will say that SDRs are the foundation of an organization. And sometimes you don't always remember that. And it was really nice to be recognized, and it kept me motivated to continue on, and helped me get promoted internally at Showpad. So for that, I'm incredibly grateful, and thank you so much for putting me forward in the first place.
Dude, beautiful story, and you're more than welcome. There's no thanks to me. It was all you. And for the listeners out there, like to kind of to Rhys's point, it was me that nominated you. And the reason I did that was when I was at Showpad and I was in that London office, I was very proud to be in that company and to be part of that team. And anybody that came on, I always wanted to make sure that they were doing their best to help our company grow, because like we were storming the market, and it was a struggle in itself, like with any scale up. And I saw you come in with this infectious positivity in the team. Like there was always banter in the office and people taking the mick out for like being in sales enablement and like content activation, but you really had a heart for it. And you'd come in early, you'd finish late, you would be asking questions, you'd always be looking to learn, and you'd always be looking to help out other people. And I think it's those things of, try to do good no matter who's watching, even when people aren't watching. But with somebody like myself, I'm always watching people, because that's my job in sales. That's what we do. We read people. And I saw the post come up, and I just said to myself that day, I was like, who would I nominate? And I said, you know what? I want to nominate Rhys. And I wanted to do it anonymously because I just wanted to see how you would take it. And I was so pleasantly surprised that you were humble about it. It didn't get to your head. It didn't cause an ego trip in any sense. And if it helped you in your career, I'm just happy to say I had a very small part in that. But I was so proud to see what you did with that sort of attention, and that obviously that helped towards where you're going and where you are now today, dude. I'm 100% humbled, honored, and privileged to be like, as a good friend. So again, guys, if even anybody's listening and you feel that you can give somebody some recognition or help them out, do it, because it can really not only elevate their career, but it can give you a nice sense of happiness. That's kind of my whole ethos on happy selling. I want to see a world of happy sellers, and dude, you are one of the most happiest sellers I've ever known. But you said like it was just before that BDR team lead role. So a lot of SDRs that are listening into this, fundamentally, they want to get into that AE and closing role. But some people take that management step, and obviously being a team lead, that's a lot of responsibility. So what was it like moving from being the SDR then going into like a team lead? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think I'd mentored people in recruitment before, and I'd helped onboard new people and manage them to some degree. I think one of my biggest challenges when I first took on the role is that because we were still in that hyper growth mode, we still are now, but because we were really, really pushing growth, and we were a lot smaller back then, I kind of had the impression that my target would be reduced, and that wasn't the case. So I remember getting told that I'd been accepted for the team lead role. I was absolutely thrilled. I was friends with a lot of people on the team, because I worked in recruitment before. I was able to also hire people into that team. But the biggest challenge really was trying to manage all of that with a full target, which I must admit it was probably one of the toughest things that I'd done, because you're still working towards a number. So yes, you might be mentoring people one-to-one, getting people up to overperform, or increasing their productivity and seeing those yields, and that's fantastic. But in the back of your mind, you're also like, I've got to get these SQOs, so otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. And if you're not delivering, your team, you can't push back on your team as much to say like, oh guys, we've had a tricky month. And they go, really, Rhys? Well, how's your month going? So I really had to work really above and beyond to try and keep up that pipeline. But it was, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great to see other people succeed. Much like yourself, in terms, putting myself forward for that award, it was really nice to, I guess, give people an opportunity to succeed. Really try and understand what do people care about? What is it that motivates them? Is it that they want to get into an AE role? If it is, great. Well, let's work together on a mutual plan to help you develop skills to become an AE, so we can prove that. So as and when a role comes up, I can not only say that you're a top performer, but I can vouch for you. And I can also say that outside of that, you've been doing these extracurricular activities to demonstrate capabilities and to make that transition a no-brainer rather than a potential risk. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me was trying to hit a full target, which yeah, it was really tough. The time management was something that I had to very quickly develop and hone in on.
Definitely. I love it, dude. And you know what, like having that leadership experience, it helps to make you an all-rounded sales professional as well. Because I remember like back in the day, when I was at Zora and I was like the SDR manager, I was the SDR, I was the team lead, and all I wanted to do was just become the AE. And my VP of operations said, Neil, have you ever thought about management? And I was like, no, I don't really want to put my neck on the line for other people. But he says, well, you one day said you want to run your own company. This is how you learn it. So I kind of took a sidestep before I joined the AE role and took it on. And to your point, you're having to manage different egos, different people, managing your time, but you also, like you said, you're accountable to the target as well. And it helped me learn a hell of a lot. And I think the one thing that I learned, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is I've had a lot of SDRs that have approached me where they're saying like they've done like the SDR role for about 6 months or perhaps up to 12 to 15 months. And they say they want to take more responsibility. They want to, kind of upskill themselves even more before going into that AE role, but they don't really know where to start. And my advice is, it's kind of like when you're looking for mentors. You can't just go and say, hey, Rhys, could you please be my mentor? I need somebody to help me. The way I do it is like, Rhys, what are you currently up to? And is there anything I can help you with? Because that's how I learn from top people. If I can do something for them, I learn about their process and they can see me as an asset and maybe help me step up in my career. That's how I've always done it. But when somebody comes to you and says, look, I've been doing this gig for a while, I kind of want to level up. What advice would you give to them to like take on more responsibility, but also be able to handle it as well?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it's a great question. I think there's a period where and I had this about a year of being a BDR where I had a good track record at this point and opportunities were coming up internally. And I was like, I think I would be a good candidate for that role. And you kind of convince yourself that you're ready. And what I would say to a lot of people is that you're probably not ready because there's so much you need to learn. And there's so much that you're just not exposed to in that second half of the sales cycle. So I think in terms of what you can do, I would definitely try and align yourself to other parts of the department, just, even if it's, cross functions, but specifically if you're trying to get into an AE role, is by this point, you would hope that you have a good relationship with your AE if you've been booking in meetings for them. So ask for them to, ask to sit in on their meetings, ask to shadow them. In return, of course, it's give get, right? If they're going to help teach you bits of skills that you don't currently possess, then what can you give back in return? Well, maybe it's helping them out preparing for a meeting. Maybe it's mapping an account. Whatever it is, it might seem a little bit like grunt work, but to be honest, when you become an AE, you'll need to do all of this anyway. So without realizing it, although it's give get, it's kind of get because you're getting skills from your AE that you don't currently have, and by helping make your AE's life easier, you're also developing skills that you're going to need to move forward anyway. So that would be that. And if you don't get along with your AE, or that you think that if there's higher performers that you want to try and associate yourself to in the business, I would just try and reach out to that AE, try and pick their brains, be complimentary and just be honest. Look, I'm trying to get into your role. I see you as a top performer in this business, and I really just want to learn from the best. Could I shadow you? Would you be open to doing some mentoring? And in return, if there's any additional support I can give you, I'll be more than happy to. First of all, we're salespeople. Everybody's got a bit of an ego. People will be incredibly humbled to hear that somebody wants them to have them as a mentor, but also you're offering to help make their life easier as well. So I think that would be my advice: is just try and get that exposure, try and learn what happens next. Because what will happen is if you don't, you'll get put in the AE role and you'll spend 6 months wondering what happens next, and then you're 6 months behind. So that would be my top tips.
100% agree, dude. And I really love that. Like you said, you got to partner with your AE. We both share a mutual friend, Ariana, who worked at Showpad at the time, and I was her SDR and she was my AE. And I saw this person that was so slick hot at sales. She was able to kind of really take control of the conversation, share the value proposition, and she was amazing. And I remember I sat there as her SDR and I wanted to partner with her. I said, Ariana, whatever company you want me to go for, just tell me what it is. And within 2 or 3 days, Ariana, I've got you're meeting at this company. She's like, how the hell did you do that, dude? And I said, well, you wanted it. I wanted to go for it. But what I'd love to do is sit in on the demo. Could I please sit in on the closing call? Could I see what it looks like with the kickoff call? And she was always happy to do that. And we had that give relationship where she tells me where to go. I will be like a knight in shining armor. I'll go grab that account. I'll book the meeting. And she also used to invite me onto face-to-face meetings, so way before the worlds of COVID. I used to actually go on as a BDR, but she did make me understand that I can't go to every meeting that I book for her. But with the important ones, especially the enterprise ones that we would book together. And she helped me close my first deal, which was scary. I remember it was the company Huthwaite International, the creators of spin selling. And I remember it was 10 licenses, and I remember saying to her, dude, can you check over my sales order? And she said to me, Neil, you know what you're doing. Just send the bloody sales order. You'll be fine. And it happened. I was like, yay, I did it. But now you've, so again, for most of the guests that are listening, and we typically talk to SDRs, and you were an SDR, now you've transitioned into that closing role finally. And that's the reason I wanted to get into, kind of show the progression of, what it takes, the determination that you've shown, and you're successful in what you do. What has it been like on the other side of the fence, actually now doing that role?
Yeah, I think, the first few months, it was definitely a challenge. I think at this point, I'd probably been in Showpad for just over a year, coming up to 18 months. I know Showpad inside out. I mean, I'm clear in terms of the product, the value proposition, but because I was still learning my trade and, I was still learning, I needed to develop a lot of skills very, very quickly. Now, with Ariana, fantastic AE that, you've worked with, and she was a mentor to me when I first joined Showpad. I'd run some discovery meetings. I've done some initial demos, but I really needed to figure out quickly what that second half of the sales process was. So I was very lucky when I got promoted. I moved into an overlay AE role. And my role for about a year was to run my own opportunities, but to also almost be a secondary AE to other enterprise sellers in the team. Now, initially, I was quite frustrated about this because I just wanted to manage my own accounts. I just wanted to, again, thinking that you're ready. Yeah. But I'm so grateful in hindsight that I had that year to work with other AEs, understand how different people approach sales cycles. And if I'm honest, I think one thing that was really apparent, and I've always tried to search for this, and I think I've finally given up, there is no secret sauce. And it sounds so stupid, but for years I was always like, there's got to be one process or one way of selling that is the way that will get everything. It will, it's got to be, it's the golden chalice. It's got to happen. It doesn't exist. Everybody sells differently. Everybody has a different way of approaching deal cycles. Some personalities work better on certain opportunities than others. So I think, stepping into that role, it was a big challenge. Luckily, I was already working with other AEs. So I had exposure where when I'm recommending next steps, I was much more confident on what I should be recommending. And I wasn't kind of fluffing my lines to be like, yeah, here's some info. I'll call you back in 3 weeks. Let me know. I was very much like, let's catch up on this date. This is what we're going to talk about. Becoming much more trusted, much more of a trusted advisor. So I think the first few months were tricky because I had a lot to learn in a short space of time. But having that overlay role, so if companies, if anyone's listening and you don't have that overlay AE role, again, it goes back to the importance of, get yourself associated with AEs, shadow them, understand what happens next. Because if I hadn't have had that overlay AE role, I think my first year as an enterprise AE would probably be a lot different, because there's a lot of skill gaps that you just don't have. So definitely I had to learn a lot. And I also think that once you start to get momentum, that don't think, oh, okay, I can do this now, and start to take your foot off the gas. There's an analogy, I think it's a pilot analogy, that they say that it's the 150-hour rule. And your first 150 hours as a pilot is actually your safest. And because most crashes happen between 100 to 500 hours, because people think, oh, I'm a pilot, I know what I'm doing now. So they stop doing the extra checks. They kind of switch off a bit because they're like, I can do this now. That's something that I always try and make sure that each week I'm either reading something or I'm going back through, and I've got a bit of a mental checklist so you don't switch off and you don't think, oh, I know what I'm doing now. You should always be looking back. Am I doing the basics? Am I doing everything? Is it, analyzing, is anything going to go wrong? Could it go wrong? If so, how would I react to that scenario? So give yourself exposure to the job before you're going in. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, absolutely, you're not going to know every question. And if you go to your manager and ask them for questions, they're not going to shoot you down. They're not going to go, oh my God, you should ask that. Why are you asking me? They're there to help you. They're there to be coaches. So yeah.
Solid advice, dude, and I agree with you. It's their job to make you successful. That's why they're in management. They've kind of been through they've been through the trenches, and they've got to help you out. And I really love that analogy of the 150 hours. That's your safest point, and I agree with that, because even today, running Happy Selling, I am a one-man band to an extent, where I'm still having to do prospecting. I have to do discovery calls. I have to do training sessions. I have to close deals, do proposals. And it always takes me back to my days of an SDR or being an AE. And I always try to go into it not saying, I know what I'm doing, I'm a professional, I've done it for 10 years. I'm like, oh, I remember this. Let's go back into it with a new mind. Oh, I wonder how, I'm going to be curious about this. Did I do a good follow-up process? And funny enough, like, David Dupree was my boss at Showpad. He's my mentor today. I still go to him with, like, what do you think of this proposal? And what do you think of this process? And, do you know, like, what do you think about this deal? I still ask those questions. And to your point, there's no such thing as a stupid question. I think it's stupid if you don't ask it and you just sit there, trying to fluff it, which isn't going to help anybody. But no, you've spoken like a VP of sales, Rhys. Like, that's some solid advice. So thank you for that. And another interesting piece, looking at your LinkedIn profile, the thing that you have with the Sales Enablement Social, and it's something that you were working on in terms of meetups with professionals, but rather me pitching about it. What is the whole Sales Enablement Social piece about?
Yeah, no, well, thanks very much for mentioning it. So when I worked at Magentis, we used to have a meetup that we would arrange every few months, and it was largely around test automation. And what it was a community to get people together, and it was very successful. And it was an idea that you can get people to network, people can learn from one another, to share best practices, and also an opportunity for companies to hire as well. So what I wanted to do is basically replicate this within sales enablement. I saw a huge gap where, because I manage our enterprise customers, a lot of the questions I get is this the right way that we approach sales enablement? Or is there a different way that we should be approaching this? How do other customers or how do other companies do this in my industry? And for me, I just thought, well, there's a huge opportunity here to try and get people meeting up, if it's every few months, just to literally, and it would be, it's not, there's no vendors attached to it. It's not necessarily a Showpad meetup. It is a company taking to the stage to say, I am Joe Bloggs, I work for company X, and this is how we approach sales enablement. These are our goals. This is what we've learned. These are the tools we use. this is the advice we would give our former selves. And essentially it's more of a discussion point where other companies can say, oh, that's interesting. Have you tried doing it like this? And those types of things. So for me, it's a community where we're looking at bringing people together to network, to share ideas, to make sure that people don't feel like islands. People can reach out to one another, learn from their peers. And also, as sales enablement and soon to be revenue enablement is blowing up, an opportunity for companies to hire people and to grow their teams as well. So that's the concept. It's really about bringing people together, sharing insights and best practices in a vendor neutral capacity. There's nothing worse than you go to an event and so you hear this really interesting story and they're like, because we bought this specific tool and for only £10 a month, and you're like, oh, come on, it's not genuine. So that's one thing that we want to do. COVID has slowed us down a little bit, but what we're planning on doing is hosting some virtual kind of roundtables before we look to get things back on site, hopefully next year at some point.
Perfect. And if I was a sales professional and I'm listening to this podcast and I want to get involved with the Sales Enablement Social, what's the best way to do that? To reach out to you directly, or to what would you suggest?
Yeah, definitely. So hit me up on LinkedIn. So Rhys Mason, connect in. We've also got a meetup group, which is on my LinkedIn page as well. So you can go ahead and connect. It's largely for sales enablement, sales and marketing professionals. So any kind of, although I've come from a recruitment background myself, apologies, but any kind of recruiters, any, vendors, these types of things, initially, they won't be accepted into the group because we want to keep it, really bespoke to start off with. But that's not to say that won't change in the future.
Perfect. I'll make sure I put a link to your profile in the show notes. So if this is something that's applicable to you, by all means, I want to help out Rhys, so feel free to reach out to him and connect and get on that. And it's something I'd definitely love to kind of get involved with next year once it's all up and running again. But Rhys, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the show. Just wanted to know, what would be your kind of 3 bullet points or takeaways for tips for anybody that's about to embark on this journey as an SDR, BDR, or maybe somebody that's, looking to take a level up into the next role?
Yeah, no, thanks. 3 things. Gosh, what would I do? 3 things. I think, first of all, there's a quote that, and I love this quote. It's a bit cheesy, but I love it anyway. Basically, Tetris teaches us that once we fit in, we disappear. And I absolutely love this, because I think in sales, you can get bogged down sometimes with the grind of, day in, day out. So keep it fresh, be yourself, be original. Only you can be you. So, be yourself, be genuine, realize that your way of selling, if it works for you, don't change it. Understand what works well, work on those weaknesses. Everybody's different and everybody has a right to be different. I think if you look at, music, for instance, Kendrick Lamar, Metallica, Dizzy Rascal, Spice Girls, they're all experts, right? But they're all experts of music, but they're all completely different in their own right. So, figure out what works for you. Absolutely stick to that. Again, I think when you're trying to become an AE, or you're looking at progressing, or even if you're just trying to hone down on your skills of being, a good BDR, really take time to understand, how does my product or my service genuinely impact a customer or a prospect? Spend time on that. If you genuinely understand how you can create value, you will be much more successful, because you'll be confident, you'll believe in what you sell. And if you don't have belief, the customers definitely won't, and you'll lose the opportunity. And don't reach out to customers unless they're genuinely, if you can see that use case, if you can see how you might be able to add value. If you're trying to call someone just for the sake of calling, don't call them. So definitely spend a bit more time on that. And then again, I think the only other thing I would mention is just continue networking with other parts of the business. Give yourself that end-to-end visibility on how an opportunity is created right through to how it closes, and get to know top performers across the business. And I think if you can genuinely be yourself, have fun, be positive, keep doing what you're doing, keep yourself abreast of changes in the company, who those top performers are, why they're top performers, how you might be able to tweak that into your own, then I think that you'll be set up for genuine success in the long run.
Spoken like a true sales professional, Rhys. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And before we pop off, are there any special shout outs that you'd like to give on today's show?
Yeah, so I think very quickly, I think you've mentioned someone already. So I definitely say to Ariana, who was my former AE. I used to run my first early stage meetings from her. So yeah, Ariana von Amrap, absolutely. A huge mentor there. Obviously to yourself, Neil, for helping me, always being positive, always trying to push me, always encouraging me to do more. And I would also say to Ian Masson as well, who is my current boss. I had a lot to learn very quickly, and so it's really reassuring when you have a manager who understands who you are, understands how you work best, and lets you go on and do those things, and is able to give you feedback to help you always continuously improve. So those would be my shout outs.
Well done, dude. Well done. All right, Rhys. Well, look, again, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I'm still going to be intently watching your career from the sidelines and cheering you on, dude. It'd be great to have you maybe back on as a guest in the future, and perhaps we could learn more about Sales Enablement Social when things come back into play. But Rhys, thank you so much. I wish you all the best of luck, and most importantly, dude, happy selling.
Fantastic. Happy selling, and thank you so much, Neil. It's been a pleasure.